You like my set? I like my set. I set it up today specifically for this video, which is just Neil Gaiman centric. I have this conversation a lot when people find out I'm a reader. Who's your favorite author? Oh, I love Neil Gaiman. Oh, Neil Gaiman, I've been meaning to read some of his stuff. Where do you think I should start? I get that conversation a lot. Like where I live, lots of people have heard of Neil Gaiman. They've never read Neil Gaiman, which is fine, but to be fair, they probably haven't read a lot of other things either. I don't live in a literary-centric town. Anyway, because I also get that conversation online, and I see it in some of the book subreddits that I follow. I want to read Neil Gaiman. What should I read? So I was thinking about it a couple days ago, and I decided that I would put in my 2 cents because I tend to disagree with what most people say. So, if you ask a lot of people where you should start reading Neil Gaiman, they will say American Gods. And I like American Gods. I really, really do. I don't think it's where you should start. If I had started with American Gods, I would have never read another Neil Gaiman thing ever. And that would have been sad. American Gods is basically like a road trip across towns in America, but you're following and you're learning about myths. Like, and if you've ever read Sandman or some of his other stuff centered around myths, he has a theme that he follows with gods and stuff, and that's that they are viable as long as they have people who believe in them. In this, the main character Shadow, Shadow gets out of jail. He gets out 2 days earlier than he's supposed to because his wife has died. Which sends him into kind of like a little spiral thing. But he goes across America and he's meeting all sorts of things and like myths, and it's really good, but it's very slow. Neil Gaiman puts a lot of detail into it, which is awesome, and some of the best speeches you'll ever hear. Just look up the Neil Gaiman I Can Believe speech from American Gods. Really good. Not where I think you should start. If you're going to start reading Neil Gaiman, couple of recommendations. Either the Graveyard Book, which is where I started, and depending on what bookstore you go to, you'll either see one cover or another, either marketed as an adult book or marketed as a kid's book. The one I bought is one that was marketed to kids. I mean, it has illustrations, kind of, has like a couple illustrations, not a lot. But it's the same story, the language doesn't change or anything, but it's really good. I read it in maybe 2 days. It's about this boy who's being raised in a graveyard by basically ghosts and what we can surmise is a vampire, but he never actually says he's a vampire, which I actually love a lot. I love that it's up to you to decide if he's a vampire, but he's totally a vampire. And I actually picked this book up because an ex-boyfriend of mine had kept trying to get me to read Sandman. He's like, you're going to love it. I'm like, I don't really do comics. I know. Older me now, like 5 years later, is like, oh, silly Emily. But it was just something I had when I was 18. I'm like, I've never really been into comics except X-Men. But he said you should read Sandman. It's like, it's a comic book, but it's for highly intelligent people. You should read it. Neil Gaiman is awesome. I never read it. We broke up, and then I was in a bookstore and I saw the Graveyard Book, and I recognized the name, and I read the synopsis. And the thing is, like, in my head since I was 3 years old, I've had a story about a girl, her name is Kathleen, who's raised in a graveyard, and it's not a story I'm ever going to write, but the fact that this guy that I'd never, like, read anything by was writing a story that I'd had in my head, really intrigued me, so I bought it and I loved it, and I went from there. The next book I read was American Gods, and obviously the obsession has grown. This is just what I own physically. Let's not talk about my Kindle collection. Anyway, so other than the Graveyard Book, a good place to start would be The Ocean at the End of the Lane. This is only a year old, but it is probably my favorite Neil Gaiman book of all time. I guess the age doesn't really matter. Like, he could put out a book tomorrow that could become my favorite book of all time. I don't know why I said that. Anyway, love it. I read this in one sitting, sat down, and it's, how long is it? It's like 170 pages or something. 180 pages. Yeah, it's about 180 pages. Really easy to read. It's an adult book told from the perspective of a child. And to me, what this book is about is how tragedy changes you in ways that you don't know when you're going through it. Like, you experience trauma as a child, and you go through it and you survive because you don't have a choice, and then you don't remember the effects that it has on who you are until something will trigger it, and you'll have this memory, you'll have this flashback, and that's essentially what it is. It's a flashback. But basically what happens at the beginning of this is the main character is living in a house in England, and his parents are having trouble with money, so they start renting out a room to lodgers, and like people, they come in like a kind of like a bed and breakfast type thing, but not quite. And he has this one lodger who comes in, and they see him a couple of times, and the last time you see him, they find him in the main character's parents' car, end of like a pathway outside of the house, and he killed himself in the car. And the violence surrounding this lodger's death sparks some, old, hello puppies, that's my kitty Lily, sparks some old magic to come up, and things start to happen. Fun fact, Letty Hemstock in this, one of the characters in this, is related to one of the characters in this, which I actually thought was fun when I found that out later. He's written about the Hemstocks before. The Hemstocks is not the main character, but they're a big part of it. So that's a good place to start. You'll also hear Neverwhere. Two other things I wanted to mention for good starting is the Make Good Art speech. You can look it up. He gave it at a university. It's really good if you're an artist of any kind, writer, painter, musician. If you do anything creative, look up that speech. And the thing is, sometimes you don't want to watch the 20-minute speech. It's a good thing to have on yourself, just to remind you that life goes on, and no matter what happens, make good art. Even if it's not good, just do it. It's a really good speech. And then the last one I wanted to mention is an amazing book, Good Omens. I'm sure you've heard of it, by Terry Pratchett, who wrote the Discworld series, among other things. He's most well known for Discworld, and Neil Gaiman, obviously. But it's hilarious. It's so funny. I had never heard of Terry Pratchett until this, and the reason I picked up Discworld is because of this. Let me just read you what the first page, because I fell off of my bed. They just said, "Get up there and make some trouble," said the serpent, whose name was Crawley, although he was thinking of changing it now. Crawley, he decided, was not him. I fell out of my bed. The snake who tempted Eve was changing his name, because he's a snake whose name is Crawley. It doesn't really suit him. But this book is about the apocalypse, but in a different way than normal. Like, Aziraphale, the angel I was just reading about, and a demon have both been living on Earth for a while, and they're pretty happy with it. And then the Antichrist is born. The Antichrist, whose name is Adam, which I also thought was funny, but so far I'm the only one who thinks it's funny. The Antichrist is born, and he's supposed to bring about the apocalypse, and the angel and the demon don't want it. So they're like, you know what, things are pretty cool here. I like this Earth. Let's just keep it. So they're doing everything they can to stop the apocalypse, which has been foretold by Agnes Nutter in the book Good Omens. In the book, she has a prophecy. She's not even close. It's really funny. It's a really funny read. If you want something lighthearted that's kind of in the vein of Discworld, but not quite. It's good, and if you never read Terry Pratchett, it's a good introduction to him. I have no doubt that the Crawley line was written by Terry Pratchett. So those are my first off suggestions. I mean, anything here that you see is great. Sandman, I definitely recommend, but I'm never gonna say start with it, because the trade paperbacks are like $10 a piece, or the absolutes are $100 a piece. So it's kind of like, go look them up at your library if you can. But Nancy Boys, which takes place in the same vein of American Gods, is one of my favorites. Stardust, which is actually, the movie's really faithful to it. Smoke and Mirrors and Fragile Things are both short story collections if you just want something easy. Coraline, which again, really faithful movie adaptation. The Truth is the Cave in the Black Mountains, which he just came up with. It's summer, take it camping, read it by a campfire. It's awesome. And then if you find, like me, that you are really enjoying Neil Gaiman, pick this up. It's called The Art of Neil Gaiman by Haley Campbell. Haley Campbell's a longtime friend of Neil Gaiman's, and she spent several years writing this book. It chronicles his career. It has original art. It has his own handwriting. It has emails that were written, and it just follows him. So I have this in my Neil Gaiman collection, even though it's not by Neil Gaiman. Um, but pick up anything. Um, once you start, you really won't be able to stop. But like I said, I recommend starting at Graveyard, Ocean at the End of the Lane, Good Omens, or even, and I didn't go into a lot of detail, but Anansi Boys is a good place to start if people really want you to start with American Gods. So, I hope that you find something here that you really like. I hope, you start reading Neil Gaiman, and I hope that you like it as much as I do, and have a good night. I'll see you next time. My next review will be Full Moon by Jim Butcher, which will either be up later this weekend or next weekend. Thanks!